Hi guys, I'm Tushar Agarwal and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hubble. Hubble for the past 5 years has been London's largest online marketplace to rent flexible office space. And very soon we'll be launching as the world's first hybrid workplace platform. We've started these videos because we're getting a lot of questions around how people should be thinking about their back to work strategy. So how to talk to your team about coming back to work. This is a really important topic. It's important because we have to recognize that the past 12 months have been a very peculiar and very unique time in history. Pre-COVID, the office for nearly every organization on the planet was a one-size-fits-all approach where everyone worked. And it's been the same thing really since the Industrial Revolution hundreds of years ago. What happened during COVID and during the pandemic is that we went from one-size-fits-all approach of the office to a one-size-fits-all approach of working at home because we were forced to do so. And as the pandemic unravels and as the vaccine starts to come into play and we start thinking about normality, actually the conversation with the team is going to be very different. Previously, most employers were able to mandate or essentially determine how and where their employees worked. And I think that's still going to be true to an extent because there will be those constraints around where and how people can work. But now that there's almost this 12-month experiment and evidence that people can work away from the office, employees are going to demand more and more say in where and how they work. And the employers, which actually listen to their employees and actually create a really great, productive and personalized work environment, will really win, and they'll really benefit from happy employees, productive employees, and much better talent hiring and retention. So it's a really important topic. And one common mistake that we see quite a lot at the moment is that businesses did do surveys, they did survey their staff, but maybe that survey happened over summer, and that's now about 6 or 9 months ago. And what we're seeing happen quite frequently is that people's preferences, what they believe, and their own life circumstances are changing. So some people may have moved out of the big city, out into, further out of the big city into the suburbs. Some people may have even moved countries. Some people may have really enjoyed working from home during the summer, but are now itching to come back, or even vice versa. Some people would have got used to and conditioned to working from home and got settled in a specific way of working, and they would have changed their minds. So one common mistake that we see from a lot of employers is relying really heavily on data, which may be a little bit old. There's probably still a semblance of truth to what you had there, but it's really important to get an up-to-date view. So for you today, to help you guys figure out how to talk to your team about coming back to work, I've got 3 top tips. So the first tip, obvious but really important, is survey your team. You probably want to do a big survey with maybe 20 to 30, 40 questions to get an in-depth understanding of your team or of your staff. And you may have already done that already, and you may have some findings from that already which are not going to change. And maybe you want to do those big surveys infrequently, maybe a couple of times a year, and you may have already done that. And then maybe you want to do some more frequent pulse surveys too. That's something that goes out maybe once a week or once a month, which has fewer questions, but helps you sort of determine that rate of change of preferences over time. So definitely survey your employees. It certainly is different for smaller businesses versus larger businesses. So for a smaller business, you might be able to get away with some smaller tools, even have a big all-hands meeting about what you want to do. For large organizations, you may have to put together a big survey that can span across departments, across countries, across different individuals, and be able to then really analyze the results of that really deeply to be able to figure out what's going on. So that will really determine on the size of your company and where you're currently based. We've seen companies all the way from, say, a 10-person company run a survey up to businesses like Procter & Gamble, which have hundreds of thousands of employees all across the world, run those surveys and start to respond and react to what's going on. But I think number 1 top tip is survey, because it's really a conversation starter with your employees, essentially signaling to them that you care, that you want to know, and it's starting that sort of conversation. And once you have that level of data, you can then poke at that data and understand that a little bit better. Top tip number 2 is to set your expectations and constraints as an organization. So you could be asking what people want to do, and maybe everyone comes back and says, well, actually, we want to work abroad. We want to work in France for 3 months. We want to work in Bali for 3 months. And if that's just not something that your organization wants to do or has the capacity to do, maybe even yet, and you plan to do it later, you should set those expectations, maybe within that survey, or in all hands, or in general meetings with your staff. You should be able to very explicitly say, look, we really want to create a personalized workplace for you guys. We want to give you flexibility, but we can't actually, at the moment, allow people to go work from different countries for 6 months, etc., etc. We have an office in this location. Perhaps we have access to on-demand locations across this span. We particularly want to work in this time zone, so we can't actually hire people from those other time zones. So you should set those constraints early. And you should be, there should be some non-negotiables in there of this is what we believe and this is something that we cannot change. And maybe there'll be some flexibility in grey areas around the margin too. But make sure you set that, and that means that actually both sides can have a much more productive conversation around what's possible and not possible. And you can get to a much more practical outcome much, much quicker. And top tip number 3 is to equip and empower your managers to have one-on-one conversations with each of their team members. So one of the things that sometimes can get lost in surveys is nuance or personal circumstances or things that people aren't comfortable talking about in a public company-wide survey because they're not quite sure who's going to see it, whether it's going to be anonymous, whether it's going to be aggregated, whether people can work out who answered it or not. So you should really equip your managers to have one-to-one conversations with each of those employees and let them open up about personal circumstances that may determine their preference of working in a particular way. You may have people who are recent parents. You may have people who need to care for family members. You may have people who have other sort of not preferences, but maybe limitations or constraints around where they can work. And actually, as a business, if you were to understand that and allow for that, you're going to get a much happier and more productive staff. So have those conversations and know that it's an important conversation to have. And when you hear what people are saying, make sure that you take that seriously. Make sure that you can respond, even if the response is, that's really interesting to hear. I'm glad that you told us that. It's something which we can think about, but we can't accommodate in the short term. However, we've thought that this other alternative might work for you instead. So that might be another way that you can basically get to the heart of what people want to do. And then once you have all of those insights, you as a leadership team, maybe as a company, maybe you want to share those insights with the whole company, just so you can see people can see what other people are up to. And then you can start to have this open dialogue around how people should come back to work, around timings, around what people want to do in terms of coming to the HQ, working from on-demand locations, working from home. Is there going to be a trial period? Is that going to be different for different teams? You can start that open dialogue now, and hopefully you'll end up in a place where you have a really, really happy and productive staff. Just to summarize, those 3 top tips were A, survey your team, big surveys infrequently, small surveys frequently. 2, set expectations and constraints around what is possible from the organization from a short, medium, long-term perspective. And number 3, have one-to-one conversations with your team as managers and equip and empower those people to have those conversations. So hopefully that was helpful to all of you guys who are thinking about this topic. We've actually put together an entire checklist called Back to the Future of Work checklist to help figure out some of those other bits and pieces around how you should be thinking about this. If you're interested, want to learn more, click below. If we can help at all, please do get in touch. You can go direct to our website, go onto the live chat. You can find us on Twitter @Hubble and find us in various different ways. Help@Hubble HQ is a really easy way to get in touch. There's always someone managing that email address. Thank you so much. I'm Tushar and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hubble, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.